friends, welcome back to Player Display. No, I'm not dead. I know it's been a little while. As I've mentioned before in my previous, most recent videos, I am trying to buckle up on the budget a little bit, so I do apologize for that. That would have been like weekly reviews all the time. It's just something I'm not really able to do at this moment in time. But that being said, there are still ways that we can have fun with this channel, so I hope that this is a decent substitute for you. It's not going to be the reigning thing that we do on this channel from here on out. There's still going to be reviews every blue moon. There's still going to be things coming in. I'm going to be doing custom jobs. I'm going to be putting figures together, doing tutorials and all that, so don't you worry your little heads about that. The channel's going to keep going. It's not going to go totally dormant. So that being said, today I wanted to do another PODguy PODcast, and I wanted to focus on horror characters, not the movies, just the horror characters, mainly the villains. And I found this list on Tiermaker, which is absolutely awesome. I love Tiermaker so much. It's a lot of fun whenever I do it. And I found this little list of horror movie franchise villains, Tiermaker anyways, and it was a very, very short list. I didn't think it was enough, so I added a whole bunch of my own. So everything from Candyman down to the Xenomorph was part of the default list, but I went ahead and I basically tripled up how many entries there are on this list, so that way it'll be a lot more fun. Now, obviously some caveats. I couldn't include every single horror villain that has ever been made. That's simply not possible. There are hundreds of horror movies. Some are very niche, some are very mainstream, some are very unknown, some are literally lost to time. So when I went to add characters to this list, I wanted to add ones that I am familiar with, that I don't know very well. Some characters I do know, but I don't particularly love as much. Then there's some characters that are kind of bucket categories where I'm like, alright, here we have a set of characters, but they more so embody a genre within horror. So that's the first caveat I wanted to mention. Second one, this list is going to work a little bit differently from the other lists I've done in the past. Horror is a very malleable genre. There's no right or wrong way to make a horror movie, because there's different types of things that everybody's looking for from a horror film. Sometimes they want to be scared. Sometimes they want to have a good laugh. Sometimes they want elevated horror, the newest type of horror film, which I don't like at all, but it adds like political subtext into the horror, and personally, as I said, I'm not a fan of that whatsoever, but some people out there, they do really love that, and that's totally okay. So this whole list, all these characters here, I'm simply going to be ranking them on how they have impacted me, how much I enjoy them, how much I don't enjoy them, how great or little their legacy has impacted the horror genre. This should be a little faster than the big, massive Star Wars ones that we do, because, of course, if you're talking something as massive as Star Wars, there's a lot of lore and stuff like that. But for horror, at least for the most part, it's usually one and done. There can be franchises, but usually of varying yields. Sometimes you have a really good first installment, but then everything after that is crap. Looking at Predator. Well, not Predator. Predator's been doing a little bit better lately, but, we'll cross those examples when we get there. But anyways, I'm just going to hop right in, and we'll see what we can do. Everything here is totally randomized. It is not chronological. It is not alphabetical or anything. We're just going to go in and see what we can do here. So, first character we have on this list is Candyman. This is a franchise. Again, we're just talking about the characters. We're not talking about the movies themselves as much. Just how much I love or dislike or don't feel indifferent about a character. Candyman, I tried watching it at one point, and I did appreciate it enough, but honestly, it wasn't quite my style. It was interesting. It kind of created an urban legend about this man who tried having a relationship with a white woman, and as a result of that, he was killed by the people around him. And after that, it kind of became like a Bloody Mary situation, where if you say his name enough times in a mirror, then he'll show up and he'll hook you dead. And that's pretty much the end of the story there. That being said, I personally don't prefer horror films that have a more political or cultural subtext to them. That's not to say that those types of movies are bad or anything. It's just when I go to watch a horror movie, I usually prefer to just have fun, relax, not think too hard. In this movie, it does require a little bit more deep probing. So, I didn't prefer Candyman as much, but that being said, Candyman as a character, I thought their performance was great. He had a lot of great quotes, like, "Be my victim." Like, those are some rattling words that you just don't forget. And then, of course, he also got the bees and everything. He's a very good, memorable character. So, where will I drop him here? I totally forgot to go over the different tiers I've set up over here. But for me, personally, I appreciate this character. I appreciate what he represents for people who do appreciate this character. So, I'm glad that he exists. I don't really need him for myself, but that being said, I'm glad that he is there for the people who do enjoy him. Moving on to a really big hitter for me, this is Chucky from the Child's Play franchise. Probably one of my favorite horror franchises there are. It goes up and down. But that being said, I really love the fact that Don Mancini experiments so much with all the different films in this franchise. Of course, excluding the Mark Hamill remake. Mark Hamill was great as Chucky, but that was, for me, its only redeeming quality. There was nothing else. But talking about the original Don Mancini movies, from Child's Play up to, I'd say, Cult of Chucky, and then the TV series, all of that has something fun. I don't think there's a single movie where it has nothing to offer. I'd say the low point is 3 for me. I really don't enjoy 3 at all. But all of them do something. Like, I really love, I think my top favorite movies would be Bride and 2. I think those are my 2 favorites. But as for Chucky as a character, he is definitely way up there for me. He is so fun. Like, I think you've seen in some of my tutorials that I do have a life-size Chucky from Spirit Halloween in my apartment. And he's just a hilarious character. He's very quippy. And his debut in Child's Play was just really, really funny. I thought he was hilarious to have around. He's got so many good one-liners and quips. He's just an absolute blast. And then you pair him with, of course, you got Tiffany Valentine, then you got, Jennifer Tilly as well on top of that. And then you also got Shitface / Glenn / Glenda. It's just always a wild time. I'm never having a bad time when Chucky's on screen. So I'd say I'd put him in the great category. He's one of my favorites. I'll watch almost any one of his movies. Chucky's fantastic. I absolutely adore Chuckster. So, moving on, we got Freddy Krueger. Again, this is a franchise which had a really outstanding first outing, and from there on out, it's kind of a flip of a coin. Sometimes they were great, like Dream Warriors I love a lot. But then after that, it kind of trickled down, and it didn't really hit the same height that a certain Dream Warriors and Nightmare 1 was able to do. That being said, I don't think I've seen all the movies. I think I've seen them all at least once. But that being said, you got Freddy Krueger, played by Robert Englund. I mean, he's one of the greatest slashers there are. Being someone who's not too obsessed with the slashers, because they can be kind of one note, Freddy Krueger is definitely an exception. I mean, he's got this very bombastic and dark personality to him, being a child killer. Then you've got these very ambiguous intentions behind him about why he wants to stalk these kids in their nightmares and use their worst fears against them. That makes him very fun. That being said, I'm not a huge slasher dude. That's definitely why I wanted to incorporate the rest of these Golden Age horror characters on this list. We'll get to them when we do. But Freddy Krueger's really great. I mean, I don't think I love him as much as I do Chucky, but, I mean, he's solid. I'll give him B for good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I know that he's at the top of a lot of people's lists, and for very good reason. But for me personally, he's not all the way up there, but that's okay. I think he is an excellent character. He's left his mark in more ways than one. He's really, really good. Moving on to Ghostface, and I've always been fascinated by Ghostface in the Scream franchise because Ghostface doesn't exist when you really think about it. He only exists when people believe in him or her. Again, it could be anyone under these cloaks and masks. But I just think it's so fascinating that Ghostface is not a character, but rather an idea sustained by the people who take up the moniker. And of course, they all do it for very different reasons. More often than not, they're after Sidney Prescott, and they want to get revenge for one reason or another. Obviously, the best Ghostfaces were Stumacher and, where did his name go? Stumacher, wait, I'm getting my names confused. Oh my god, I don't want to lose it here. Yeah, it was Stumacher and Billy Loomis. There we go. Okay, I had it right. I got myself confused. There's been so many Ghostfaces. That's why I'm getting totally lost. But the two of them, easily the best Ghostfaces, easily the scariest. And from there on out, some were scarier than others, some were more reasonable than others. But when you take Ghostface as a concept, I think he works extremely well. I mean, why does Ghostface exist? He's a parody of all the slashers that came before him. It was a subgenre within horror that was kind of slowing down. They weren't cranking out a whole lot of Michael Myerses, they weren't doing a whole lot of Jason Voorheeses. It was just getting a little bit weak as a genre. So then you get Ghostface, who parodies the genre by taking all the tropes and pulling them together. You have a slasher who's aware of all the other slashers that came before him to inform him more on how he goes after his victims. And that makes him a lot more fascinating. So no matter what movie he's in, he's still a blast, always a klutz. Well, not necessarily. Sometimes he's a total klutz, and other times, like in the new movies especially, he's really scary, he's got his firearms and stuff like that, and I think that's another thing that makes this character so good, is the fact that he's so grounded in reality. You can believe that Ghostface exists, and that makes him even more meta. The fact that you could actually endorse the fact that, yeah, there could be a Ghostface out there. There could be someone who one day picks up a mask, picks up a knife, and has a vendetta, and they go out and do their thing. So it's a realism behind this character that I think makes him so effective. So I think I'll drop Ghostface into A tier. Great. And last note for him, like growing up, for me, like I was looking at all the Ghostface masks in the Halloween shops and stuff like that. Hadn't seen any of the movies or anything of that nature. I just saw the Ghostface mask. And for me, it was like, this is the face of Halloween, or the icon of Halloween, as all the merch totes him as being. But yeah, he's just really fun, fantastic character. Very iconic mask, very hard to forget. The portrayals, they can vary, I mean, depending on who you prefer to be under the mask, but no matter who's wearing it, they're always scary, simply because he is such a grounded character. Moving on, we have, of course, Hannibal Lecter, as portrayed by Anthony Hopkins. He's going right up to the best, I think. He's one of the all-time horror performances. There are very few who can go neck and neck with him. I absolutely adore Anthony Hopkins. I mean, being someone who's part of the autistic spectrum, and then you also have Anthony Hopkins, who is also part of the autistic spectrum, I just like to imagine that part of that informed his performance in a really big way, and that's what made his character so calculating and scary, and it's not to say that anyone who's on the spectrum is automatically going to be a murderer or anything like that, but just that very cold, pragmatic atmosphere that he built, like whenever somebody entered the room. I just thought that was so expertly done. There was not a single wasted word of dialogue. He never blinked at all whenever he was looking right into the camera, not just at Clarice, but looking at you, the viewer, almost as if acknowledging that you're there. And that made him a truly effective villain. And then at the end of the film, I know there's a franchise, but for me the only one that matters is Silence of the Lambs, but at the end of it all, he gets away. And then you're wondering, what's this guy gonna do next? This horrible monster of a dude. What is Hannibal the Cannibal going to do to the world now that he is somehow free? And that's what makes him so interesting. The intrigue, the ambiguity. What's making this guy tick? What is he interested in? The way that he's able to manipulate people. And that just makes him one of the all-time greats for me. Moving on, we have Jason Voorhees, another classic 80s slasher, of course made in the aftermath of Michael Myers. He's kind of a bootleg of Michael Myers, to be honest, but that being said, I kind of enjoy Jason Voorhees a little bit more than Michael Myers, simply because we're able to relate to him a little bit more. He has a distinct backstory, being that he was a young kid who was kind of left to his own devices as the camp counselors were, kind of doing their thing, and he drowned in the lake and no one was there to save him. And then eventually he's resurrected from the dead in order to exact revenge. And even though the movie's definitely vary in quality, they're always a fun time. So that's always well and good. So I think I'll also give him a good category. I'm not obsessed with the Jason character, but I enjoy him. I think he's solid. The movies themselves, they're up and down. Same with Freddy Krueger, honestly. But Jason Voorhees as a character, I think he's very enjoyable. I love the fact that he has a distinct backstory to go along with him, and I really love his silent demeanor. His little quirks, like just shifting his head around like Kane Hodder, I think absolutely sold him. He was the best Jason easily, and yeah, I mean, he's just one of the icons of horror. Even if you don't know the movies, you definitely know the mask. Moving on to Billy the Puppet from Saw. He is, again, part of one of the default characters on this list. And then down here, somewhere, right here, is John Kramer. I consider them both separate entities, so I did want to split them up. So anyways, we have Billy the Puppet. He is effectively John Kramer's avatar. Billy the Puppet doesn't actually do anything. He's a puppet. He only talks when John Kramer wants to talk. And he's effectively the icon of the Saw franchise, which I do love, and I think is actually very consistent overall. But that being said, he's just a little bit of Jigsaw's paraphernalia. Billy the Puppet doesn't really have any insurgency over anything. He's kind of just there to contribute a voice. That's about it. So I appreciate him. He's good, but for me, I more care about the man behind the puppet master himself, being John Kramer. He's just a lot more important to me. We'll get to him when we do. Next up, we have Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, another franchise I think had two really good movies, being 1 and 2. Then after that, it kind of trailed off. I think the Netflix movie was an abomination. I didn't like that at all. And another thing that kind of deters me from enjoying a franchise is when it doesn't have a distinct timeline. There are so many different timelines in the Leatherface chronology, to the point where it just gets confusing and a little bit frustrating. But that being said, I think the most interesting thing about Leatherface is the fact that he is inspired by, same with many characters on here, he's inspired by Ed Gein, a real-life, I believe, 1950s serial killer who did indeed exhume carcasses from the ground, turn them into furniture, and created his own suit out of flesh. So that was kind of the weird thing, because I'm very interested in serial killers. It's kind of one of my things, and Ed Gein is probably it's weird to say that, I have a favorite serial killer, but rather it's, I'm curious. I'm interested in the serial killer, what made them tick, what made them the way that they are. So I was very invested in Ed Gein. So when it came to me finally seeing Texas Chainsaw Massacre, knowing what I already knew about Ed Gein, I was actually underwhelmed, because I wanted it to be more gritty. I wanted it to be more visceral. And granted, I'm sure it was that for its time, but for me, it just didn't quite meet my expectations. As for Leatherface himself, he's a solid character. I mean, he's very archetypal. There's no real arc to him or anything like that, except in the later movies, but at that point, it doesn't really... It doesn't feel correct for the character. This is one of those horror characters who should remain static, who should remain as kind of the lapdog for the other characters in the Sawyer family. He's as much of a coward as he is a killer. He's very dog-like, is the best way to put it. And that's what makes him scary, honestly. He's a character that you don't want to change. You don't want him to learn. You want him to just be Leatherface. And he functions very well. So, for me, I think I'll put him, once again, in the appreciated category. I don't think I'd put him as high as Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees. But he's good. I appreciate him. I think he's fine. I changed my mind. I'll put him in good. That's pretty much where most of the 80s slashers will wind up for me. Now we have another interesting case. We got Leprechaun from the Leprechaun franchise. One of very diminishing returns. But he is portrayed by Warwick Davis. Of course, if you know the Ewoks, he is the Ewok Wicket W. Warwick. I mean, he's named after the actor himself. And he is a bag of laughs. He's a very fun character. Not nearly as iconic or as enjoyable as Chucky, of course. But he's still a fun little bag of gags. I mean, he's good. He used a pogo stick to kill someone and all that. And the movies are all over the place. They're definitely guilty pleasures. And you know what? I think that's where this character belongs. So we'll drop him into guilty pleasure. Again, we're going to spend a lot more time on some characters than we will on others. So we're just going to go through it. Now here we are. Michael Myers. Probably the most popular slasher of all time. I think the greatest intrigue about this character is, at least for the initial movies, you don't know why he is the way that he is. He's simply a bad seed. He's impenetrable to bullets. It puts him down for a while, then he gets back up, and he keeps marching towards this babysitter. And again, I think this franchise suffers for the same reason that Texas Chainsaw does. Is there's so many different continuities, there's so many retcons. Like, I prefer a Michael Myers that has no connection to Laurie Strode. He's simply after her. But when you get to Halloween 2, then that's when they suggest that, oh, Michael Myers is the brother of Laurie Strode, and that gives him reason to go after her. For me, that doesn't work as well. I prefer a character who's simply pursuing someone for the sake of pursuing them. You don't know why. You don't know why they're invincible. You don't know why they can't be stopped. They just keep marching forward and nothing can stop them. And that's what makes a character really scary, when you don't know their intentions. So it's kind of a contrast from Jason Voorhees. For Jason Voorhees, you know why he's killing these people. He's got a vendetta. He has a horrible, tragic backstory. But for Michael Myers, not really. I mean, again, depending on what continuity you're talking about, but the Michael Myers I prefer is one that has no real reason to be the way that he is. He just simply is the boogeyman. That being said, if I'm to just choose that specific iteration of him, I'd say he's good. Again, I'm not a huge 80s slasher guy, but he is potentially one of the best, simply based on the fact that he has no characterization whatsoever. He is simply an unstoppable tank, depending on what movies you're watching, who is marching forward for no reason other than wanting to kill this one person. And that's what makes him work for me. Now, we've got a really great one. We've got Norman Bates from Psycho, which is also a franchise, believe it or not. I have seen those movies only once or twice, so I can't remember them too well. Obviously, they don't hold a candle to Hitchcock's original. I mean, of course not. They were instead directed by Anthony Perkins himself, being Psycho. And they were actually interesting enough. It kind of went into his psyche, him trying to join the real world and get away from Mother and all that. But for me, I have a lot of sentimental value to this movie because somehow I watched this movie without it being spoiled to me. So I remember watching this movie with my own mother, funnily enough, and I was just trying to figure everything out. Like, the mother's running around killing the woman in the shower, then killing the detective on the stairs. I'm trying to figure out, like, so Norman Bates claims that she's horribly ill. She's bedridden. She can't really do anything on her own. She's paralyzed. She can't walk or anything. She could talk up a storm, but for the life of her, she can't actually do anything. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe the mother's a liar. Maybe she does have these spurts of energy in her that allows her to do anything that it takes to protect her boy. But of course, I was dead wrong. That's when we got to the woman, I don't remember names, unfortunately, of the NPCs in these movies, the sister of the initial main character going down into the basement, finding the taxidermy Norma Bates, and then you get Norman popping through the door in drag, and that's your aha moment. That's the only moment in cinema that actually blew me away, because I did not know about the plot twist. And I think that's the only plot twist that ever really worked for me. So, obviously, the performance was great. We got another Anthony who did a very good job at his acting, so we're gonna drop him into the best. Excellent movie, excellent acting, a very charismatic and alluring performance from the actor. Everything was great here. Or, well, not great as in A tier, but the best. I just think this is one of the best performances, one of the best horror movies. He has to be up there. So now we move on to Pennywise. Now we got two Pennywises in here, I believe. We should have the Skarsgård and the Curry. Let me just check that. Is Skarsgård here? He is here. Okay, so for now we're just talking about Tim Curry. I prefer Tim Curry's Pennywise more. And the reason for that is, assuming you don't have a fear of clowns, at face value, he just comes off as a clown. There's nothing inherently scary about him at face value. But when he does get scary, he is terrifying. He has those really huge teeth, the giant claws. He becomes, admittedly, a really hokey spider at the end of the day. But I just think he works pretty well for his time. For modern audiences, I don't think that this is what they want. They want something with a little bit more CGI, something with a more updated score in the background. I think the music is another really big part of it. But for me, I just prefer a really classic, traditional clown. And yeah, being that, yeah, I know that this isn't very accurate to the novel itself, but being this particular iteration of Pennywise, I just love this version so much more. He's a lot more funny and goofy, very sadistically so, and that's a version that works for me a lot better. So, again, not a huge character for me, but he's good. He works, he's just fine. So, we'll take him. Now we got Pinhead from Hellraiser. I've only seen, I think, the first two movies, and the most recent one. And Pinhead is a really cool character. I really like the fact that he's not necessarily the main antagonist, and he's not even a bad guy or a good guy. He's simply just the voice for a higher power. He's a cosmic villain, similarly to Pennywise. Like, Pinhead, he's not particularly interested in, like, yeah, he embodies pleasure and pain, and their, the symbiosis between the two. But at the same time, he's not really interested in, like, ha ha ha, you're in pain, or anything like that. He's not malicious, which is a very weird thing to say for a character who is very focused on pleasure and pain. He is simply just speaking for the box, for these higher rules that the Xenobites, is that right? I get Xenobites and Xenomorphs confused all the times, but the Xenobites, like, that's their thing. They're simply just reading off the rules to people who are unfortunate enough to come across the box. They themselves, they don't really have insurgency as to whether these people live or die. It simply comes down to the choices of the people who come across the box itself, whether they strive to become immortal, whether they want the greatest pleasures or pains. As for Pinhead, though, he's simply just speaking on behalf of the box. And that makes him a very different type of antagonist. Not a villain, really, but more so an antagonist. A character that weighs against the main characters of the film, but isn't the direct threat. He's simply the mouthpiece. So again, I think we have another good character on our hands, so I will drop him in B tier. Now we have another kind of niche character here. We've got Pumpkinhead from Pumpkinhead. Again, I think there were several movies in this franchise. It's no longer ongoing. I think it's pretty retired by now. I think there were 3 or 4 movies. I could be dead wrong. I really don't know. I've only ever seen the first one, but basic premise is there's a bunch of teenagers. I mean, that's how a lot of these movies start off, and they accidentally kill the child of a man. And the man wants to get revenge by talking to a witch who summons Pumpkinhead to effectively kill the teenagers one by one. For me, it's a pretty meh premise. I don't really feel either way about it. It's fine. I don't see a whole lot of intrigue in it. It's cool enough, but I'm kind of neither way on it. So I'm going to drop him in the don't know or don't care tier. But one character I do really care about, who is also very niche, is Blade from Puppet Master. Now, even though this is just Blade, I consider Blade to be, of course, the embodiment, the single character that represents all the other puppets in the franchise. And I absolutely adore them all. I think they're all fantastic. Maybe not the ones in the Axis trilogy. I haven't really watched those, don't really care about them as much. But in like the original, I think 7 movies it was, from Puppet Master 1 to Retro Puppet Master, all those puppets I love dearly. I really love that they have their own unique personalities, they have their own weapons, they have their own little voices and everything. They have their own backstories. Like as for Blade here, he is possessed by the spirit of a former friend of Andre Toulon, being the main Puppet Master. And that's why Puppet Master 3, Toulon's Revenge, is my favorite. It's because he's got the puppets, but now you learn about where they came from. They're not just simply possessed puppets, they were old friends of his. And I find that idea very enticing. So, for me, I think I want to put him in the great category. Again, he stands here representing all the puppets together. And I think all of them are fantastic. I don't think there's a bad one. I mean, they're bad characters in that they run around killing people, but in terms of the sheer enjoyment, I really do unironically love the Puppet Master franchise and the puppets themselves. So, I'd say great. That works for me. Now we move on to the Xenomorphs, or the aliens from the Alien franchise. Once again, big franchise. Movies are up and down. First 2 were great. All the other ones after that, kind of a take it or leave it category. But as for the Xenomorphs themselves, I think the most scary character design in film. I don't think there's anything more terrifying than this. I mean, I'm not scared of it personally, but just in terms of weighing all these different characters together, I mean, you can get as scary as you want. I mean, you can get a humanoid character wearing a mask. You can have a humanoid character that's a little bit, that's less human, that's more monstrous, like Pumpkinhead, for example. But there's something about the Xenomorph Geiger design that genuinely feels out of this world, and rightfully so. It feels very mechanical and organic and alien, all wrapped into one. And that's scary enough on its own. Then you get the life cycle of a Xenomorph. You got the face hugger, you got the chest burster, you got the Xenomorph, you got the queen, you got the hive. So you got this distinct mechanical life cycle of these creatures on top of them already being shit your pants scary. So that makes them very effective. Their only motive is to simply reproduce and expand. And that makes them quite terrifying. So, honestly, I think I'm going to drop them in the great category. I can't quite put them in the best because there are characters that don't really have very complex motives, but sometimes it's a simplicity, similarly to Michael Myers, that makes them a genuine horror. So I think they're absolutely one of the best characters in horror movies. It's just in terms of face value fear factor, they're up there for sure. Now let's move on to rolling way back in time to The Fly. I've only seen the original Fly. I haven't seen the Cronenberg one. That's on my bucket list though. Very simple movie, enjoyable but not very complex. You have a doctor, science experiment goes wrong. A lot of movies from that era play out that way, and then he effectively merges with a fly. Not a whole lot to say here. It's a simple case of science gone wrong. Then you got a fly guy, but I really do love the character design, so I think he looks really cool. So for me, I'd say not a great character because it's a trope that's been done so many times and done better before and since, but I'd say I'd put him in the guilty pleasure category. Not quite appreciated. Appreciated is I know why people love these characters so much. As for Fly, he doesn't have a huge fan base, but I enjoy seeing him. He's fun. It's all whatever, you know? So, anyways, moving on. Next up, we have Cujo from Cujo, everyone's favorite evil pupper. Actually, I love the fact that my mom, who was a former dog groomer before shit hit the fan with COVID, she finds this movie actually hilarious because this type of dog is known for being very, very friendly. And to see one being a feral animal tearing people up, to her, it's just hilarious. So, in turn, I find this movie very funny, having that knowledge. But it's still a fun movie. I really love those small 1980s Stephen King movies. I just find them very cozy. And Cujo's no exception. I do enjoy this film. I'd say I'd drop it in the guilty pleasure category. It's just a fun movie to throw on. Nothing deep probing or anything. It's just a dog with rabies, and that's pretty much it. Is it a great movie? Not really, but it's a fun watch. I enjoy it. Now we're moving on to The Grudge. I forget a real name, but I've watched it once, don't remember it too well. We're moving into the category of characters that I threw on here, not because I have personal attachment to them, I just wanted to roll over them really quick. Watched The Grudge once, also watched The Grudge versus The Ring, whatever that movie was titled, I totally forget. That was its own version of bonkers fun as well. Honestly, I wasn't too frightened, feeling either way about The Grudge. I was kind of indifferent. Neat character design, but I definitely prefer Samara Morgan any day over The Grudge. I think The Grudge was kind of a try-hard. Yeah, it's a scary concept. I mean, it's a traditional Japanese character with the long black hair, the big striking eyes and all that. It's crawling around in a very animalistic manner. I get it. Big deal. So I appreciate this character enough. It's fine. I get why people find her scary and all that, but to me, just not a big deal. Now we move on to Brom, the boy. I definitely wanted to throw him up here. I've only seen this movie once, but it did have a very good plot twist. Obviously, this whole list is going to be very spoiler heavy, so if you weren't expecting that, sorry, but here we are. This wasn't a favorite movie of mine, but I really did appreciate this film, so that's why we're putting him in the D tier. The plot twist, well, basically the story was that you have a babysitter who's hired by a crazy little old couple, and she's tasked with babysitting a doll, and it keeps moving around on its own. So you're thinking, oh, it's possessed, it's a ghost, this is a ghost story. But at the very end of the movie, you learn that there's an actual son to this couple who is living in the walls of the mansion the entire time. And throughout the duration of the movie, he was moving the doll around. And that is such a great change of expectations. I thought that plot twist alone is what makes this character so good. Not like a top movie for me, but I seriously do appreciate what this movie was and what it was trying to do. I think it absolutely succeeded tenfold, so kudos to the boy. Now we move on to the aliens from They Live. I really do love this movie, and I'm glad that it's a standalone. I'm glad it didn't become a franchise or anything like that. It kind of had a cliffhanger, more or less. You had the main guy shoot the satellite, then he gets shot and he dies. The secret of the aliens is exposed to the world, and it ends right there. I really do love this movie, and I love the aliens too. You have very, even though they all pretty much look exactly the same, they all react very differently upon being noticed. They're either fearful, or they want to contact the higher-ups to warn, hey, some dude's got the glasses, they're able to see us, and whatever like that, but they're acting just like normal people, and I think that's what makes them, in a very uncanny way, very frightening. And also the design, it's so 80s, and I really love them, so I think I really do adore them a lot, but would I put them in the great category? I'd say more so guilty pleasure. I love them not because that they are particularly intelligent or particularly scary. They're just a lot of fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now we move on to The Creeper from Jeepers Creepers. Again, a case where it's a whole franchise, but I've only seen the first one, so I can only speak to that. But it's an interesting concept of a character, of a monster, and it's a genuinely frightening one, where you've got this alien or something, I don't remember the full context, where it's hopping from person to person, yanking out teeth, of course eyes, being part of the titular song and all that, and limbs and wings, just trying to pull the best features of living things to make itself into the ultimate apex predator. I think that's a really cool concept, but I haven't seen the rest of the movies, and there's some behind-the-scenes action that I don't know a lot about, but I know it ain't too good. So, we'll leave it at that. But, ultimately, I think it's a really cool monster, so I appreciate this character. Now we move on to Damien from The Omen. This movie freaked me out as a kid. My mom showed me a lot of movies I probably should not have been seeing as a child, but that movie genuinely scared the pants off of me. Between the decapitation, the impaling, the potential prospect of killing a child, it was just a scary ride. And then that woman jumping out of the window, it's an inside joke between my mom and I now, her going, "It's all for you," then jumping out the window with the news. So this movie was just really bonkers crazy. And as for the kid himself, absolutely terrifying. He didn't have to do that much. But it was the little subtle things, like, I think waving towards a black dog at one point, of course right here, doing a final grin to the camera. He was a creepy little shit. He definitely worked. So, for me, it was more so the events of the movie that scared me than Damien himself. But without Damien, those events obviously wouldn't have happened. But, so I'd say he's a good character. He serves his purpose well. I'm more so interested in the events that occur around him, but he's a good foothold for those events to happen, so all good there. Now, here's where we have another bucket category. We have the Purgers from the Purge franchise. So this is less so based on a specific character, it's more based on an ideal within a franchise. Where, of course, you know the premise of the Purge, where you have a single evening every year where all crime from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. is legal. Anyone can be killed, anyone can kill, it doesn't matter how they do it, what weapons they're using, they could just go out and release the beast. That's a very scary concept. And I think it actually works pretty well in these movies. And oddly enough, they improve as time has gone on. But even then, I think I enjoyed the first one pretty well too. It's an isolation story. You've just got this single wealthy family that's trapped in this house by some wealthier students who simply want to purge, and the family is harboring someone that they want to kill. And they're like, hey, if you guys let this guy go, we'll let you go. But if you want to keep him, we gotta kill you too. And on top of that, you got this political subtext where you have the family being a supporter of this security system that's meant to prevent the purgers from purging. but at the same time they support the Purgers as well, so there's kind of an irony there. And again, I don't prefer political subtext in my horror films, but here I felt like it worked in tandem with justifying why a purge would exist. So all the Purgers are definitely scary. And again, similar to Ghostface, it feels like something that could really happen one day. Hopefully it never does, but you've seen things that have been similar enough. So it's a franchise that I'm not head over heels for, but I really do appreciate it. So I will drop that into the D tier as well. Again, D tier doesn't mean bad, it just simply means they're not an absolute favorite of mine, but rather I get it and I understand it. So anyhow. We got Captain Spaulding from the House of a Thousand Corpses trilogy, or rather the first two, because unfortunately the actor died before the third one could be fully realized, so he only had like a single cameo in there. But I only enjoy the first movie of this trilogy. I saw the second one, I just found it very distasteful, I didn't like it at all, and I haven't seen the third, so I can only speak to House of a Thousand Corpses. That movie was a really interesting ride. Definitely Rob Zombie's style. I think that was his magnum opus. Of all the films I've seen from him, I think this was his best. I think he's a better musician than he is a director, but that being said, this was a really strong movie, I thought. And Captain Spaulding, again, this is more a case of where it's less about the individual character, more so representing everybody else, being the Fireflies, Dr. Satan, and all the crazy character designs and archetypes that we got in this film. So, as for Spaulding, I think he was a lot of fun. He was very scary. I don't remember the film too well, though. So, I'd say I'd have to put him in the appreciated category as well. Now you move on to the Critters from the Critters franchise. I've seen all 4 movies only once, and I only recall enjoying one of them, being the second. And unfortunately, I'm a Gremlins kid. So watching this, I just couldn't help but feel this is a Gremlins ripoff. I can't really enjoy this, because I know there's something better. So it was really hard for me to give this film, like, its own merits. It was very difficult to do that. So that being said, I don't hate them at all, but I'd more so say I just don't really care about the Critters at all, and I can't really appreciate them because they're so derivative, so they're just not in the zeitgeist for me. I just don't really feel any which way about them. I'm just like, why watch Critters when I can watch Gremlins, you know? With that, I'm going to drink one of the Gremlins' weaknesses, being water. 1 second here. Well, weakness as in, it's an issue for Gizmo, but a benefit for the Gremlins. But anyways, I also decided to throw in the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, being Sweeney Todd. I thought this would be an interesting entry, so I threw him on the list as well. I really do love this movie. It is a musical, of course. The stage play is also very good. But here we have Johnny Depp, who is kind of a horror legend. He was also in A Nightmare on Elm Street, of course. That was his film debut, I believe. And now he's here. And he's a great character. Very well fleshed out, really good backstory. His family was abducted by this bureaucrat dude, by a judge, right? Yeah, he was a judge. And then Sweeney Todd was pretty much exiled. Then he returns to London to get revenge against the stinkers who did him wrong, and he tries to get his family back, but everything ultimately culminates in him killing his own wife. So he has an epic tragedy of a story with him, but it works so goddamn well. So for me, just because of the story factor alone, I actually want to put him in the great category. I think, like, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, Michael Myers, all the characters up here, they're a lot of fun in their own way. But in terms of storytelling, I don't think they quite hit the nail on the head. But I think, all around, Sweeney Todd, or Benjamin Barker rather, that being his real name, that is what really puts him above. Just a really good story. It's not just the character. It's what occurs around them, what happens to them and for them, that I think makes him work so well. Now we have, again, a more niche movie. We have Gabriel from Malignant. I've only watched this once, but it was a really good surprise villain, where you had like this parasitic twin on this woman who's living on the back of her scalp, and then it becomes an absolute killing machine where he takes over the body. He effectively needs to gear the body to walk backwards in this really cryptic and weird way, and it worked extremely well. And this was just a really fun character. So I'd say, not really guilty pleasure, because I do think it was a good movie. I just don't remember it super well. So I'll drop him in the good category. That works for me. Now we move on to Dolls. This is a precursor to Puppet Master, also done by Charles Band, but he did Dolls first, if I'm remembering right. This is a very fun movie. Easily the best part of it is the practical effects, a whole lot of stop motion, a whole bunch of dolls just communicating with each other, knocking the crap out of characters that you want to see the crap knocked out of. I really do enjoy this movie. I say the story is definitely stronger for the puppets from Puppet Master. I mean, kind of by proxy. I mean, there's only one Dolls movie, then there's a whole bunch of Puppet Master movies through which they could be fleshed out. So I feel safe putting the Dolls in the guilty pleasure category. Now we have John Kramer. He's an S tier easily for me. I adore this character. I think it's such an interesting case where he does have justified motives in doing what he's doing, but at the same time, he's a massive hypocrite. So he's a character you can understand in that he wants to put people through all these traps, through these games, in order for them to achieve self-realization, self-appreciation, to adore the gift of life, get a new lease on life and all of that. But at the same time, he's getting these people killed in these traps, so there's easily a fallacy in what he's doing. But at the same time, you do sympathize with him, especially in Saw X, which was easily a top 3 Saw movie for me. Being someone who's like a Saw purist, who really loves Saws 1 through 6, and 7 a little bit. 7's not quite as good. But yeah, just an excellent character. There's not a whole lot more I could say on him. Excellent performance. I really love Tobin Bell. I think he hits the nail right on the head. I hope we see more of him. I really do want more Saw movies where he is the centerpiece. I really want more of that. Next up, this is more of a conversation piece. This is the Armitage family from Get Out. This is where you talk about elevated horror. I don't love elevated horror. Like movies like Midsommar, Nope, things of that nature. Anything from Jordan Peele, at least. Again, they're not bad movies. They're very good, very well produced. But again, they hit a little bit too heavily on the social context. And for me, it just takes me out of that. I'm no longer scared. I less feel like I'm enjoying a movie. I start to feel like I'm more being talked to. So it's more, I felt like I was being lectured for 2 hours more than anything else. Like, white people, they take advantage of black people, which, yes, is a true thing, and I agree with that in a lot of respects. But in a horror subtext, I just feel like they don't mix well, at least for me. So this is a case where I appreciate what it does for the people who enjoy these movies, but for me, it's just not something I'm willing to revisit. Very good movie, it's just not my thing. And that could be said about all the other elevated horror films that we're starting to see these days. Now you got the Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I love Shorty, he's my favorite. They're easily guilty pleasure. Nothing complex or deep probing about this film whatsoever, but it's just such a delight. And again, it's a case where I'm glad that it's a single standalone film. If they did more, I feel like it might actually hurt the brand, so I'm glad it's just its own thing. The clowns are hilarious and ridiculous. It's a totally stupid movie, but it's meant to be, and that's why it works. Next up, we have kind of a package deal. We have Reagan and Pazuzu from Exorcist. I was never scared of this movie. It's too funny. I'm kind of quoting the Zodiac Killer at this point, but it's so out. That's the thing. It's similar to how I think about things like Terrifier, It's so outrageous that it loops from scary all the way back to funny in a very phenomenal way. Like, do you know what she did, your bleeping daughter, and all that crap. It's just a totally outrageous character, so fun to watch and ridiculous. So yeah, this has got to be a guilty pleasure for me. Again, nothing wrong with guilty pleasure. It's so fun to just enjoy these characters for what they are, even if there's nothing totally deep about them, right? So, anyways, moving on. We got Patrick Bateman as portrayed by Christian Bale in American Psycho. I never loved this movie, and I think the issue for that is for the same reason why I have issue with the Dark Knight movies. I am not a Christian Bale fan. I don't like his acting. I feel like too much of his ego seeps into the characters that he's portraying. And granted, it matches. I mean, here you've got, well, a psycho, quote-unquote, being portrayed by someone who has a distinct ego on him. But my issue with the movie is this isn't a psycho at all. This is just a guy. This is just any other person having their fantasies. And it kind of ends with that, it's all fantasy, it's all a dream sort of thing, which is notoriously one of the cheapest cop-outs in storytelling. So for me, I don't hate it, I just don't really feel either way about Patrick Bateman at all. Don't care to watch it again, it just is what it is. Now we got Bela Lugosi's Dracula. There are so many incarnations of Dracula, so I couldn't include them all here. We have two, though, so we've got Bela Lugosi. Then we got Max Schreck, we'll get back to him later. But as for Bela Lugosi, I mean, what's there to be said? He's one of the best portrayals of a character ever. Without him, we wouldn't have the idealized Dracula that we've got portrayed and parodied so many times that we do today. I mean, he's got a Hungarian accent? I can't quite remember. But, yeah, just the charisma, the charm, the seductiveness. He embodies what the traditional Dracula is supposed to be. Excellent performance, even if it's not totally source accurate, but within this bubble, it works so well. It's timeless. I'm going to put him up there as one of the greats. I feel no issue with that. Now we got Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. This list initially included Hannibal Lecter, but I mean, you gotta have Buffalo Bill too. I mean, he's the secondary villain, rather the primary villain in this film. He's also a very controversial one, I'm not gonna get into that, but this is another character who was inspired by Ed Gein. Again, a character who's just so funny to watch. So many quotes from him, like, it puts a lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again, and all that. Just some of the best lines in the film. A film which is usually very scary, very dark and grim, and then you get Buffalo Bill doing his thing, and you're either very disturbed or you're very well humored. So, for me, I guess he's a guilty pleasure character as well. I'm going to start going through this fast because if I pause this and come back, I'm going to lose all my custom entries, so I just want to get through these. The rest of these, there's not going to be as much to say. We got through the big characters already, I think, so we'll see. Then we got Stripe from Gremlins. Of course, there's a whole bunch of Gremlins, like there's Mohawk and Daffy. You got George and Lenny. There's so many Gremlins. Then you got Gizmo, but Gizmo's not a villain at all. Stripe is the Gremlin, obviously. He is a terrifying character. He definitely freaked me out as a kid. I guess one story that I have about Gremlins is I remember my mom had, well, obviously by this point you know that my mom is the one who introduced me to horror. She had a whole ton of VHS tapes, and one of them was Gremlins. And I looked at the front and the back of it and I'm like, Mom, can I watch this? And she's like, it's a little too scary for you. You should watch it when you're older. So for me, it was like this taboo, almost, of a film, where I can't watch this now, but one day I'll be able to. And finally that day came, and I absolutely loved this film. I watched it like 3 times a day throughout a week. I was so obsessed with this film. As for Stripe, I thought he was a badass, and I also thought he was really scary. He actually infused a lot of suspense and horror elements in a film which is otherwise very comedic and sarcastic and full of satire. But when it came to Stripe, and his final confrontation with Billy. You, see his face popping up on the TV monitors all of a sudden. He's also charging at Billy with a chainsaw. He has that little mini crossbow. I don't know what that was doing in that store, but whatever. He's got a gun. He's the most resourceful gremlin, easily. And I think he was just an excellent character all around. For me, I'd put him in one of the greats. He served his purpose well. He was very memorable, very fun, very hilarious as well. I love this character. I'm putting him in the greats. Now I want to talk about a little movie which you definitely haven't seen, but you must see, because it is so goddamn bad, but it has to be seen to be believed. It's Scarecrow from 2002 or 2003. Someone uploaded it on YouTube, and I mean, when someone uploads a movie onto YouTube rather than the studio itself, that says a lot about the movie. The fact that there's no legalese to protect it from being uploaded for free on YouTube is just such a goofy movie. I'm dropping this right into guilty pleasure. It's one of the worst directed films I have ever seen. From the camera work, to the pacing, to the music choices, to the acting, to the characters, it's something that needs to be seen to be believed. If you're into those, C-grade horror movies that are solely exist to just give you a good time and nothing more, check out Scarecrow from 2003. It is so funny. I won't spoil anything else. Next up, we have the lipstick-faced demon from Insidious. I've only seen the first movie. Just the introduction of this character was so good. This is a case of sensory overload. You had Tiny Tim playing, then you had this crazy little craft shop, where you got, all these gears spinning and stuff like that. You just got him doing his thing. And from that little moment on its own, you get so much characterization about what the lipstick-faced demon is. It's not just a static demon or anything. It's got its own characterization. It's got its own eccentricities. And that's what made him such a fun little character. So for me, and he's also really scary when he's crawling on the walls and all of that, in that dimension and everything. I haven't seen this movie in a long time, so I can't really name specifics, but I'd say he's a good guilty pleasure character for me. I really love this character. Do I love the movie? Upon rewatching it, I didn't love it as much, but I do enjoy this character in that one moment, so he's good there. Now, kind of going back to Cujo territory, where I was talking about the little Stephen King movies from the 80s, that takes us to Pet Sematary with Gage Creed. The most adorable little killer ever. But every time you see him, you're like, oh no, this didn't need to happen. This shouldn't have happened. The father should have known better and all that. I really do love this movie. I know it's not the best movie, it's not the best acted, not the best directed. I don't think it's totally accurate to the book, because the book was somehow even darker. But I really do love this movie. It's so cozy. I think I'll watch it after I do this podcast, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's just such a cozy little film. Gage is an adorable sack of peanuts. I love him, and he serves the movie extremely well. I think I'll put him in the great category. Just because you have that build up, or rather that build down, of just having one of the cutest little kids in cinema becoming an absolute horror. Not just because they're a reanimated corpse, but because it's no longer the kid anymore. Now it's possessed by forces that we're not supposed to meddle with, because sometimes dead is better. But anyhow, moving on to another guilty pleasure character, we have Tarman from Return of the Living Dead. Maybe my favorite zombie movie. At the very least, top 3. But I'm going to put him in guilty pleasure. He only shows up for 2 scenes. He's the first zombie to ever demand brains. And then the next time we see him, his head gets knocked off. So he's just a really fun character, very harrowing character design. I love the fact that he's portrayed by a mime, giving him his very particular movements and everything. Just a fun type of zombie variant. I really enjoy this film. Now this one I'm cheating a little bit, I'm bending the rules. We have Hell or the Maschinenmensch from Metropolis, a silent film from the 20s. People don't classify this as a horror movie per se, But for me, I see it as dystopian horror. I've only seen the movie once, but it definitely blew me away. I really loved that movie. I don't remember all the details. I don't remember all the characters. It's a very full movie. There are a lot of details to absorb. But I thought that Hell, or whatever you want to call her, because she has so many goddamn names in the movie, she was a genuinely scary character. The fact that she was able to get revenge on behalf of her creator against these revolutionaries by embodying their leader and then seducing them, and then just by that act alone turning the entire metropolis on its head, and then by proxy causing a flood and everything. She was just a really scary character. Not a character with an intellect of her own at all, but an instrument for some vengeful scientist. That just made her so good. I'm going to put her in S tier. I really love that movie. I've only seen it once, and still, I think that she was such a good character the way she was used. Very, very good. Now let's move on to the Miner from My Bloody Valentine, a personal favorite of my friends. She actually introduced me to this movie. I watched it, and I actually really enjoyed it. It's a little cult classic from Canada. A very cute little movie. Cute little movie coming from a horror fan. Yeah, it's a cute film. Interesting character because it's associated with two different people, either Harry Warden or Axel. For me, it's an interesting case because I really want to see a My Bloody Valentine movie with just Harry Warden doing his thing. In both the original and in the remake, it's all about Axel. He's the dude doing the deed. And then it ends with the plot twist, at least the original, of learning that, it was Axel all along, and he witnessed one of the original murders, and that drove him a little bit crazy. And that ends in one of my favorite endings for a horror film, where he's kind of just running off into darkness, no one's able to get him, he's maniacally laughing and everything. So, yeah, it's a good character, but one that's not explored enough. We don't explore Axel enough, we don't explore Harry enough. But the idea of the Miner is very enticing. So for me, I wouldn't put it in guilty pleasure category because I think he is so well handled. So I'd put him in appreciated. I appreciate this character, I just wish we got more out of him. Now, I think this is the only character that's going to have a tier all to his own. This is the Invisible Man from the 2020 remake. I absolutely hate this iteration of the Invisible Man. You want to know why? I'll tell you why. You know what? Firstly, before we talk about him, let's talk about the original Invisible Man from the 30s. I absolutely love this character. For me, this is a great character, if not S being the best. No, I'd say leave it at great for now. The reason why I love the original Invisible Man so much is because it's a classic stereotype of science gone wrong. But there's kind of a difference here. It's not just a guy trying to be the best scientist ever. He's a guy who's doing all this for the sake of his, I believe, his wife at this point. He simply wants to be a good husband. He wants to be providing. He wants to be lucrative. All he wants to do is provide a good life for his beloved. And that's it. But the science is what drives him mad. That's what drives him to wanting to dominate the world. That's what drives him crazy. So that's what makes him such a good goddamn character. And then, of course, you got the performance as well, which was absolutely outstanding. From Claude Rains, of course. I had to refer to one of my movie posters for a second there. So that's why I hate the 2020 remake. Because it's a total inverse of the original film. It totally spits on what made the original Invisible Man so good. It turns the Invisible Man into a misogynist. It turns him into an abuser. It doesn't work. It creates such a flat and boring character that I'm just not interested in. And then you got this little stupid techie suit that he's got that makes him invisible for the modern update. I don't want that. I just want kooky mad science. I don't want it to seem practical at all. I don't want the invisibleness to be believable to any capacity or sci-fi. I just want it to be mad science. That's what I prefer. I really hate this new Invisible Man, and I created the F tier just for him. So he's going to be sitting there all on his own. The rest of these characters here, there's something enjoyable about them, even at worst case being guilty pleasure or simply, I get why other people like them, I just don't care. This is the only one that I despise. I'm gonna leave it at that. Let's move on to Tiffany Valentine from Bride of Chucky and from the films that came after that film. Well, most of them. So, she wasn't in Curse, but she was in Cult, right? Am I right about that? No, she might have been Curse too. I haven't rewatched Curse or Cult in a while, but she's another great character. I mean, of course, she is the bride of Chucky. I mean, it's a Bride of Frankenstein thing. It's kind of the point. I adore this character so much. You know what? I'll put her in great as well. And you know what? I'll put her right next to Chucky. Why not? Because they're kind of a good pair. They go off each other very well, I think. Chucky's got his sadistic ways. And then you have Tiffany kind of bringing in that more maternal edge, like doing all these quotes from her mother and stuff like that. She's similar but different. And I think both of them are equally enticing. I really do love them both. Now let's move on to Kessler Wolf from An American Werewolf in London. Really awesome character design. This is my favorite werewolf in cinema, easily. Very scary. At the same time, very funny because of how brash he is when he first shows up. Just this big, roaring monster of a thing. So over the top. So lovable. It's an adorable pupper. I love him a lot. I'm going to drop him into the good category. Serves his purpose well, makes this one of the best transformations of a character into another character in film history, in my humble opinion. I mean, an inspired thriller, so obviously. But yeah, that goes in the good category. Next up, another very self-inserted franchise. Anyone who's familiar with my channel knows how much I love the VHS franchise. Easily one of my top 3 horror franchises of all time, if not one of my favorite franchises ever. Here we have Lily from the first VHS film. What was that segment's name? I don't remember. Date Night, it could have been? I don't remember. But this segment absolutely blew my mind. For those of you who don't know VHS, it's an anthology film series, so it's like a whole bunch of short horror films. But as for Lily, though, it's such a good setup. I mean, you got these guys who are out on the prowl, trying to bring some woman home and have their fun and everything. And then you get this really creepy girl in Lily saying, I like you, I like you. That's kind of the main line of the VHS franchise. Anyone says that, you know exactly what franchise they're talking about. But the thing about Lily is that she's not a human being. She's a siren. In fact, she had a whole standalone film devoted to her, which I don't remember too well, so I can't really speak to that. But she definitely gave a huge, I guess you can call it a plot twist. One of my favorite plot twists that I've ever seen, where she happens to be a siren. There's that really big split in her face that comes out. She grows those wings. She flies the guy away up into the stars, never to be seen again. And that's what told me this franchise is different. It combines the supernatural with the grounded. It pulls no punches. It's going to do whatever it can do to surprise you. This is also a very good horror movie. If you are interested in just watching one, I highly recommend watching either this one or 99. The reason why I say 99 is because VHS 1 is extremely graphic, one of the most violent movies I've ever seen. But if you want to play it safe, then do 99. That's a safer route. But yeah, Lily and the VHS franchise, I adore them so much. For me personally, and just the way I view film, I actually want to put her in the S tier. I do value this character that much, and not just because of that, but also I mentioned in a previous podcast, I started watching the VHS films during a very difficult point in my life. So when I finally started watching these films, it gave me something to be invested in. and I was sincerely blown away. I love the VHS franchise so much, except for Viral. That one can go eat shit and die. Moving on, we have another. Again, it's kind of debatable whether you want to call it a horror film or not. I'd say it's more of a thriller, more of a drama. More drama, I'd say. But back then, it was definitely a horror film, just because people weren't expecting what was coming in this film. And these are The Freaks, from Todd Browning's Freaks. Todd Browning is the same guy who directed Bela Lugosi's Dracula. Then he made Freaks, and this movie terrified people so much that Todd Browning's career never saw the light of day ever again. This film was buried until the 80s, then it was re-released and constantly reevaluated, and it's been a pretty decent cult classic ever since. I really adore this film. It's only about an hour long, but it tells a very good story. It was very ahead of its time. It featured actual circus freaks. When I say freaks, it's not meant to be derogatory at all. It's simply their title within the circus, the carnival that they're traveling with. And again, this is a case of them not being villains at all. They're simply a family, and they'll do whatever it takes in order to protect their families, the individuals, and their differences. And of course, this comes in the form of Hans being one of the dwarfs in their community. And when they realize that there's a woman who's trying to mooch off of him, trying to marry him, then poison him, then get all of his money, that's when they go and get their revenge. Then unfortunately, as much as I love this film, it has a very lackluster ending, which was significantly cut down because of the censors. That being said, though, The Freaks, they just tell a very good story about adversity, facing justice, exacting your own justice, and I just really love them. At the end of the day, you don't blame them at all. You agree with The Freaks. So for me, I'm going to put them in A for great. I think it's a great film. All of them serve their role well. They're all very unique and interesting to watch. They're all very fun, and I just love them. They're great. Now let's move on to Count Orlok, or Nosferatu, from Nosferatu. This is another S tier for me. This is my favorite version of Dracula. I don't prefer the sparkly vampires that we get in Twilight. I don't prefer as much the very charismatic and charming Bela Lugosi that we get. I still love him a lot, but he's not quite my favorite. The Dracula, the vampire that I prefer most, is very scummy, off-putting, disgusting, and gross. I'm not sure if that's what Bram Stoker initially intended, but this is the version that works for me the most. And on top of that, you got Max Schreck's iconic performance as a character, who is a very shifty individual himself. And on top of that, this film was actually informed by actual occultist imagery, making it all the more spooky and giving it a feel of that it's a taboo film. It's a film that you shouldn't be watching, like kind of like what I said with Gremlins. Like, it's a film where you watch it and you feel almost as though, like, should I be watching this? Like, what other world am I looking into right now? It just has this very otherworldly feel to it, which is very much embodied by Nosferatu himself. Just from all these little movements, his dialogue, or rather lack thereof. Of course, instead you get text cards in there. But, yeah. If you've never seen this film before, look for one where a guy is smashing an organ. That's what I always say. Don't look for one where they're playing stupid new age music in the background. Look for a good version of this film. It's a great one. Now let's move on to Eric, I believe. Yeah, Eric from The Phantom of the Opera, portrayed by Lon Chaney Sr., the Man of a Thousand Faces. Really great character. I prefer this one more than the version that we get in the musical, because in the musical he's a lot more sympathetic, but here he's a lot more selfish, a lot more about himself, getting what he wants. Even at the very end, his very last move is a prank. Like, he suggests that he has a bomb or an explosive on him, then he outstretches his arms and starts laughing maniacally, and then he's ultimately beaten to death and thrown into the water, and that's where the film ends. this is another great character for me. Sets a really good template. Even though he is totally malicious and disgusting, he's still a little sympathetic. You kind of wonder what could have been if he wasn't rendered such an outcast because he was studying darker aspects of life. And again, an ambiguous character. You don't know everything about his past. And I kind of like that you don't know everything about him. Makes you want to know just a little bit more. It's tasteful teasing, you know? Next up, we have Frankenstein, another classic version of a character who is not the villain of his own story. He did not ask to be alive. He is simply brought to life by, Dr. Victor Frankenstein. I still call the monster Frankenstein because to me, he is Frankenstein Jr., so that checks out for me. For me, I'd say I'm going to start going through these fast because I'm getting tired, actually. I'm going to drop him into the A tier. He's a very strong character, very unfortunate demise, until, of course, Bride of Frankenstein revealed that he did indeed survive. But speaking of that, I'm going to say right now that Bride of Frankenstein is the greatest fanfiction ever written. Anyways, moving on. Now you got the Yautja, the Predators from Predator. These guys are A tier for me. I really do love the Predators, more so than the Xenomorphs, actually. I don't think that the Predators are nearly as scary as Xenomorphs, but I love the Predators more just because of their culture, because of their civilization. It's an interesting case because I prefer the Predator species more than I actually prefer the movies. The Predator movie that I want them to make hasn't been made yet. One that explores their culture, one that explores their creed, what they believe in, and stuff like that. And the movie that did the best at that was AVP, honestly, where you have the three Predator brothers going into that underground pyramid and facing off against the Xenomorphs. And then you learn about this brotherhood, you learn about their honor system, and that's what makes them very enticing to me. So for me, they're great, or one of my favorites. I love them a lot. Now, I also threw in Jaws, the shark, or Bruce, rather, as he's also called. Again, serves his purpose fine, no issue with him at all. I'll put him in the good category. I think it's a movie that's more about the humans, like Quint is easily the best character in the whole film, but Jaws does his job. He's really scary. I love the Universal ride in Universal Studios. It really sucks that they took it down. Now we get to the Ginger Dead Man, which can be viewed for free on YouTube if you were so inclined. I might want to watch this tonight too. It's a weekend. It's high noon for me. Guilty pleasure, easily. Gary Busey, hilarious performance. I'm not going to spoil a damn thing. Go watch Ginger Dead Man and go watch Scarecrow 2003. They're both within the same vein of each other. So goddamn funny. Also Charles Band, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, that was Charles Band. Yeah, so very great character. Very fun to watch. Now we have Esther from Orphan, who apparently got a sequel, which was just as good as the original. You know what? This character's so good, I don't want to spoil anything. So I'm going to take Esther. I'm going to drop her into the great category. And I'm going to leave it at that. Go watch Orphan if you haven't watched it. Look up no trivia or anything. Just watch the original Orphan and let me know what you thought in the comments. It has a plot twist that's so good, I'm not even going to talk about it. So, moving on. We have Art the Clown, one of the latest and greatest slasher villains. I have a serious soft spot for Art the Clown. As I've sort of said before, these movies get so cartoonishly violent, it's no longer scary, it just gets so funny. And Art the Clown, similar to Michael Myers, he's totally unpredictable. You don't know where he's coming from. You don't know what his motives are. He's just an agent of chaos, and that's really all that can be read from him. For me, he serves his purpose well. He does everything that he needs to do. I want to see more Art the Clown, and we will get more Art the Clown. There is a third movie slated for November or December, I think, so I hope we see it soon. Really looking forward to that. That's an A tier for me. Now we got Annabelle. I really don't like the Conjuring movies at all. I mean, here it is. Here's how every single Conjuring movie plays out scare-wise. It's a 3-step process. First step, person gets scared. Ah, it was scary. Second step, they realize, oh, it's nothing at all. They're like, Okay. Third step. They turn around. Then there's an actual scary thing. They go, ah! And they start running or screaming or whatever. These movies are so formulaic. They're so boring and unscary. They do absolutely nothing for me. So you know what? Oh, that I'm going to drop Annabelle in a hate. I really don't like this franchise. I feel like it's just a money grab. It's a product to me. I don't feel like there's any passion in these movies at all. They're just not scary. I really don't like them. And you can also bucket the other franchises that go into it, being Annabelle, Conjuring, Nun, all of those. They're all one and the same to me. They've had no effect. I feel like I just wish people would seek out the more niche horror categories, being like 1930s or 20s horror, or 1980s Stephen King horror, as opposed to this product shit. I just don't think it's good. Now let's also talk about Megan from Megan, another film that was a surprise to me. I'm actually surprised I enjoyed this as much as I did. Very predictable plot. I mean, you got AI that goes wrong. The way I like to put this movie, it's the Chucky remake, but done better. This is the movie that they should have released instead. Very good human characters who you actually care about and understand their dynamics. And as for Megan, I guess the only knock that I have against this character is that you don't really see her become her truly scary self until towards the end. But still, the build-up is very good. Her learning from her environment, from the people around her, from the good people, from the bad people, just studying her surroundings, and then all that culminating into her just becoming a homicidal maniac. All to protect, and then eventually kill this ungrateful girl, or what she perceives her as anyways. So, I really enjoyed Megan. I'm going to put her, again, it's kind of slow at the start, so I'll put her in the good category. But I think if they do a sequel, which is already planned anyways, she will ascend to greatness. And maybe if they do really, really good, she'll go to the best. I think if they give her a sequel, or just Megan doing her Megan thing for the entire movie, I'd put her up to great. Just to see her cause a little bit more chaos. Now we have Jack Torrance from The Shining, one of the most overanalyzed films ever made. Not a huge favorite of mine, but again, I appreciate it. I know there's a whole lot of theories of like, how was Jack Torrance in the picture at the end of the movie? For me, I just think simply it's self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just history repeating itself. The building's possessed, it draws families in, it repeats history, the family dies and some escape, and history repeats itself. So that's as far as I've ever thought on it. But then you got Jack Nicholson doing his Jack Nicholson thing, and this is probably the best thing that he's ever done. I mean, obviously. One of the best horror films ever made. I don't know if I agree with that consensus, but again, I appreciate this character, I appreciate this film, and what it's done for the genre. Now we have Clover from Cloverfield. I am a sucker for a found footage film. I mean, you know how much I love VHS, so that obviously it funnels into here. Very cool creature, very good movie. I appreciate it, and very great character design as well. We also got The Thing. I could say pretty much the same, thing. I was never in love with this movie, but it does have one of the best character designs ever, so I will still put this in the appreciated category. Now we could talk about the other Pennywise portrayed by Bill Skarsgård. These are good movies. They're both good. They're both fun to watch, but they're a little too shiny for my taste. I prefer the 80s grit that came with Tim Curry's Pennywise a lot more. As for this Pennywise, my issue with him is he's off-putting from the start. There's no suspense at all with him. As soon as he shows up, "Hiya, Georgie," you already know he's a bad clown. Like, there's no question about it. At least with Tim Curry's Pennywise, you're like, okay, this is a little weird, but let's see what he's all about. And then you realize that he's a terror. But for this one, you just know right off the bat that he's an evil force to be reckoned with. And he loses a few points for me. So, but he's not a bad portrayal. It's a very good portrayal, but I definitely prefer Tim Curry more. So I'll put him in the appreciated category as well. I don't dislike him at all. There's just a version of him that I prefer more. So simple as that. Now we have the Bride of Frankenstein, or simply the Bride. She's a very difficult character to place because she doesn't exist for very long. The Bride of Frankenstein, it's all about the build-up towards revealing the bride. But when she does show up, she is so well done. Very good character. You have these very fox-like movements. She seems very feral in contrast to Frankenstein's monster. And I guess Frankenstein's monster sees this, and that's what causes him to terminate himself, and her, and Dr. Frankenstein, and his buddy, all in one go, because they belong dead. And she's really great for that moment, and for the thematic nature of this film, but we just don't get enough of her, which really sucks. So, I'm gonna have to put her in... I think she was used right, but I have to put her in appreciated. I just on the fact that I really want to know more about her. I really would have liked to see her develop more, see what she'd become, see if she too could become like Frankenstein's monster, starting to understand humanity, or if she would just be a lost cause. We'll never know. That's an unfortunate fact. Now we have The Babadook, a movie that I don't particularly care about. I've watched it several times, never really loved it, but still, I appreciate it. It embodies, basically a mother's guilt, or her inability to take care of her very erratic son, who very obviously has special needs of some sort. Again, I kind of put this in the elevated horror category of film, where it's focusing very greatly on a more social or political message, so it kind of loses me there. It's not as focused on the fun. I prefer more fun horror movies more oftentimes, but it's not a bad movie by any means. It does its job, it does fine, so I appreciate Babadook. I'm glad it's there for the people who need it. Next up, we have Black Phillip from The Witch. This is a movie, the first time I watched it, I didn't like it at all, but I rewatched it one or two times, and I did come around to it a lot more. And I think Black Phillip was part of that, being that as all these deaths and murders are happening, Black Phillip is kind of just there. And then when you have Anya Taylor-Joy on her own, she's the only person left, and then he offers her to live deliciously, then that's a very good, creepy little moment. And then that leads to her joining the coven of witches and everything, and there's a lot of ambiguity surrounding Black Phillip himself, who may or may not have been Satan incarnate, probably. That's the usual consensus, I think. But yeah, I think this character did their job really well. I'd say I'd plop them into... They did their purpose really well, so you know what, I'll put them in... While I don't love this character as much as I love characters up here, I'll put them in appreciated. That works for me. Now you have a really tricky one, maybe the trickiest of all of them here. We have Burke from London After Midnight, a film which has notoriously been lost to time in a fire. You can't watch this movie, you can simply look up basic synopses about what the plot was about, but that's pretty much it. But at the same time, I really enjoy the prospect of this character. The intrigue, the fascination with the fact that we'll never know more about him because this film is lost. So, just the mystery, the air around this character. I really like that. So, putting him in appreciated, can't really put him anywhere higher for obvious reasons. We just can't watch the movie. It's impossible. Hopefully there's a grandpa who dies one day, and then their grandson goes in their attic, go like, hey, here's a copy of London After Midnight, and then we can all watch it after that, but we'll see. Next up, we got Samara Morgan from The Ring. I have also watched Ringu, but I honestly preferred Ring more. That might be sacrilege to prefer the American remake over the foreign original, but I prefer Ring more than Ringu. I think a lot of people feel that way, but this is a really interesting character to me, because it's a character where throughout you start learning about, oh yeah, this little girl, she was killed by her mother, and now you have this mother this other mother trying to break this curse of these videotapes by trying to redeem her spirit. But by the time that she does this, we realize that Samara was just malicious anyways. So we accidentally saved a villain. And I think that's a really good plot twist. So I'd put her up there with one of the greats for me. Not quite S tier, but still a really good goddamn character. Now we have Sam from Trick or Treat. He's a good character. I enjoy him. I like the character design. I like how he's kind of the guardian for Halloween. He's got that trademark lollipop with him at all times. He's very fun. But I don't love the movie a whole lot. But I appreciate that it exists. I still like that there are these little cult movies that other people enjoy. Like, I got my own cult movies. I got Puppet Master. I got VHS. I got Scarecrow, Ginger Dead Man, Dolls. So it's okay to have these cult movies. And I think this is a very good cult movie, and also an anthology movie, so that's interesting. Next up, we have Godzilla. To this day, for some reason, I have not watched the original Godzilla. I don't know why that is, but I know for a fact that I prefer the original one, just because I don't like the CGI stuff. I prefer a guy in a suit, or stop motion, or puppetry. That's just always where I fall in line with. Again, I think I'm going to say I appreciate this character. Because he is an allegory for nuclear war. At least in his earliest beginnings, before he became somewhat of a superhero, he was supposed to represent the hardships of Japan following the bombings. And that's translating something in real life to a film. And I think that worked really well. That's kind of the legacy that this character leaves behind. Like, even being someone who has not watched this film, they know and respect the basic premise. So all's good there. Now we have Boris Karloff's The Mummy. I'll be honest, I actually love the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies more than the Boris Karloff one. I feel like the Boris Karloff one, by comparison, was a little too short, a little too quick. It didn't focus on the relationship between the mummy and Anck-su-namun enough. I feel like it kind of glossed over certain details. So, again, I'm going to have to go with appreciate on this one. I appreciated what the basic bones of the story that it was trying to put together. It just didn't quite get there for me. And again, there's a version of the mummy that I prefer more that I grew up with. So, that's how that lines up there. Now we have Carrie. There have been, 3 versions of Carrie? And honestly, I think all of them have their merits, but Sissy Spacek is easily the best one. And I think this was the first Stephen King book adaptation to film, if I'm not mistaken. But this was an awesome, awesome movie. So well directed. I love the camera work. The acting was phenomenal. Carrie herself, someone who you're rooting for really until the very end. You definitely feel bad for her all the way up till her death, her demise, under the crumbling house and everything. And even when she's wiping out like the entire high school body, you still feel bad for her at the same time. Like, these are people who did her wrong, and now she sees no other option but to wipe them out. So you get it. You might not agree with it, but you get it. But the whole film was so great, and this is a fantastic character. So I'm going to put her up in the A tier, next to another great female character being Samara Morgan. So let's do that. This list is getting very congested, but we're almost there. 3 to go. Next we have King Kong. This one I have seen the original of, and a lot more of the films within its franchise. So I still am not sure whether I prefer Godzilla or King Kong more. Honestly, I do prefer Mechagodzilla. I don't know, as a kid, I've just always loved that design so much. But as for King Kong, he's the most sympathetic of all these characters, in all these giant monster movies. I mean, he lived on Skull Island, and he was abducted by the white man, then carried overseas, and then he just fell in love with this little tiny woman and wanted to protect her at all costs, and he got shot down for that. So for me, I'm not head over heels for this character, but he's still a very good character, so I'll drop him in the good category. I can't really drop Godzilla up there because I haven't seen the original Godzilla, so it wouldn't make any sense for me to put him up here based on preference. Anything in the good, great, or S tier category, I had to have seen them. Same with C as well. So, anyhow. Next up, we got Creature from the Black Lagoon, also referred to as Gillman. Similar thing to King Kong, honestly. You have a creature who's living in their own domain, living peacefully, but then you have people kind of invade their territory and wind up killing the creature as a result. Very simple movie, not very complex, a little bit repetitive, honestly, but I still do enjoy it. The creature is iconic, one of the best monster character designs in film history, very recognizable. I will drop him in good. I think he served his purpose well. Not the best movie of all time, but it did its part, and I really did enjoy it. Last but not least, we have The Wolfman. Even though this is the very first Wolfman movie, I still prefer American Werewolf in London more. But this one, I still appreciate it. I mean, humble beginnings, right? Same with Mummy as well. So, there we go. That is our tier list. I didn't rank them as anally as I did with all the other tier lists that we've done. As in, like, ranking them, like, would I put Ghostface above Chucky, or Phantom above Orphan? Like, I wasn't that particular this time around, but again, horror is so subjective. Like, you're going to prefer certain characters for very different reasons. Like, I could see people taking the Armitage family from Get Out and putting them all the way to S tier. That is totally fine and justified, I think. But for me personally, I just don't enjoy that type of horror, and that's okay. But honestly, I think that's one of the things that makes horror so great. The fact that it's such a versatile genre. There's so many different ways you can enjoy it. Whether it's just for shits and giggles, like with Ginger Dead Man or Tar Man, or you sincerely love the characters like John Kramer or Lily or Nosferatu. There's a lot of ways to enjoy horror, and I think that's what makes it so special. But anyways, that's all I got to say here. I hope that you enjoyed this little PODguy podcast. I have absolutely nothing else to say. As for pre-orders on this channel, hopefully something comes in soon. I'm not sure when they're going to come in, but as soon as they do, then bet your bottom dollar we will be doing our usual reviews. So, thank you guys very much for your patience. It's just a budgetary thing I gotta worry about, so, I gotta live, so I gotta figure that out. Speaking of that, I am going to eat, so hope you enjoyed this podcast. Let me know in the comments what some of your favorite and least favorite horror characters are, and what you're hoping for in the future from those characters. So, that being said, hope you enjoyed, rock on, and I will see you all later.